To the Moon was about seeking fantasy from reality, whereas Finding Paradise is about seeking reality from fantasy. Two sides of the same coin. To the Moon was an RPG gem that brought tears to my soulless heart. It is a beautifully crafted game, although lacking in gameplay, it compensates by combining the best writings and music into a one-of-a-kind experience. For this reason, getting started with its sequel, Finding Paradise, can be a bit daunting, because developers might not be able to replicate the same emotions that the players felt in their previous works. But after finishing the game, I felt that Finding Paradise, although based on the same premise as To the Moon, was able to take me on a roller coaster of emotions by exploring different aspects of a person's memories that weren't mentioned in the last entry of the series. It should be noted that they released 3 other short stories as a build-up to this sequel, which is the 2 Sigmund Corp mini episode and a bird story, which serve as an introduction to the main character of Finding Paradise. All of those games won't be covered in this video because I dedicate this episode to Finding Paradise only, but I highly recommend you guys checking it out to get the full picture. And with that said, sit back, relax, and join me as we discuss why Finding Paradise is such a narrative masterpiece. The game still follow Eva Rosaline and Neil Swartz, our 2 beloved specialists from Sigmund Corp, who grant wishes of people who are about to depart this mortal realm by altering their memories, allowing them to live different lives. Their client this time is a retired pilot named Colin Reed, a man who had a seemingly fulfilling life, now wished to change his memory. Before Eva and Neil began the process, the game showed us how his son and wife felt about him using the services of Sigmund Corp. The wife Sophia was a bit unfriendly and reluctant when talking to the 2 doctors, while her son Fred, even though he seemed more open and was willing to show the doctors around the house, he was more or less as heartbroken as his mother to think that their father wasn't happy living the life he had with them. This was an aspect wasn't discussed in To the Moon, how the patient's decisions to change their memory affect the loved ones. Perhaps in To the Moon, Johnny didn't have any children and his wife River died long before him. The authors didn't have the chance to explore this new perspective. Another reason would be that Colin's backstory isn't as tragic as Johnny. We can see that Colin had a beautiful family, a successful career, and that he had lived a long and happy life with them. But his family's happiness isn't synonymous with his own. This contradiction created a conflict between him and his family, which in turn established the weight of this mission will have on not only Colin, but also his wife and son, which put more pressure in the procedure Eva and Neil is about to conduct. As we traverse through Colin's memory, his wish starts to unfold itself. It seems that not even Colin truly knows what he wants. He said he wanted Sigmund Corp to give him the happiness he desired while changing his memory as little as possible. With a vague request like that, Eva and Neil decided to go through the old man's memory to seek out the bits of lingering regrets he still has to hopefully give peace to him. But as the journey goes on, the doctors notices how little his family has a place in his memory. Instead, most of them are about a girl named Faye, who Neil theorized that there was a love interest that Colin didn't make a move on, and thus live his life wondering about what could have been. But things aren't always what they seem, as it turns out that Faye was actually just a manifestation of Colin's consciousness, in other words, an imaginary friend. Now it might sound silly, but if you have played a Bird story, we can see that Colin isn't the most sociable kid. He often got left out and his parents is away most of the time. So when Colin was nurturing an injured bird, it felt like as if he finally had a friend. But by the time the bird was healed and is ready to go, it left a hole in Colin's heart. So many argue that Faye was actually the representation of the bird, with the evidence of how her sprites and color scheme looks almost identical to it, and the fact that Faye is the motivation for Colin to learn to become a pilot. It is fascinating in a way to see that a lot of medium, including Finding Paradise, using imaginary friend as not a subject to ridicule or as resources for children's related topics, but instead to signify Colin's character growth and emptiness. Colin have lived a quarter of his life happily with Faye, but she doesn't truly exist, so Colin have spent all those years getting a job at the airport and practicing his silo all on his own. All of those words of encouragement and companionship that Faye provided was nothing more than imaginary, or in a way, that was just Colin talking to himself. However, that doesn't change how Faye's presence played a tremendous role in Colin's life. Beside her, Colin barely has any friends. We can see that Colin doesn't remember any of the faces in his school or even his boss at the airport. The only one who is prominent in all this memory is Faye, who have stayed beside him throughout his journey as a student, all the way to when as a pilot apprentice, to give him the courage to press on in life. But of course, one can't stay a kid forever. When Colin finally meets Sophia and the airport starts closing down, it marked the end of the chapter in the man's life, and in order to move on to the next, we must let something go. For Colin, it would mean he have to let go of Faye, his best friend for all of those years to pursue his dream. The game portrayed this farewell in the most beautiful way possible, with hand-drawn graphics and emotional dialogue. Even though Colin's saying goodbye to Faye, a person who isn't real, sound like a silly thing to be emotional about, but I bet that many of you would be able to relate to this final meeting on a personal level, because saying goodbye isn't easy, especially with those who mean a lot to us. We as people must have gone through lots of goodbyes in our lives, and for sure many tears were shed, and it's difficult to cope with that feeling of emptiness someone left behind afterwards. For this reason, many of us might be reluctant or even afraid of saying goodbye, and Colin as well. We shouldn't look down on him as a child who lost his imaginary friend. We are looking at a man who is bidding farewell to his childhood, all the days he had with Faye, and the feeling of security that Faye would always be there for him no matter what, is now all in the past. We see the effect of the hole that Faye left Colin take place as he get older. The man had a panic attack after he had his first child. This huge sense of responsibility is overwhelming for a father, and it's natural to be scared, but Colin without Faye find it a little bit harder to suppress his fear. Another scene where Colin and his son is playing in the playground. He feels like as if he is seeing Faye across the street. The lingering hole that an old friend left behind seemed to be haunting Colin, but judging by how he has lived his life to the fullest, he might have managed to overcome it and found his own happiness. It is poetic in a way that if you remember the quote from the developer of this game from the beginning, finding paradise is about finding reality in fantasy. We see that Colin was trying so hard to replicate his reality based on Faye, aka a fantasy, but when life goes on and that world he lived in starts to crumble down, he feels insecure as a normal person would, but still manages to pull through and didn't waste his life in something that doesn't exist. But that begs the question, why did he want to use the services of Sigmund Corp? Sigmund Corp, the company that has the technology to alter people's memories, fulfill their wishes, and give meaning to their lives. To some people, they are a blessing as well as a curse. In this context, we see that Sigmund Corp as the one who can fill the gaps in Colin's life, but at the same time, the one to make all of those gaps in the first place. Kangao, the developers of Finding Paradise, make an interesting comparison between Sigmund Corp and the concept of reversible decisions in a video celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the game. Basically, reversible decision is that we tend to become less happy with the choices we made if we were given the opportunity to change them. Sigmund Corp provided Colin with the opportunity to remake his life. But as a person who has to fight to let go of his fantasy, to embrace reality, he was bewildered by the endless possibilities of a perfect life without any mistakes that he forgot about the things that truly mattered to him. So in the end, Sigmund Corp is deleted from Colin's memory, leaving all of his other memory intact. He can now live his life to the fullest without wondering what if the grass is greener on the other side. In a way, Finding Paradise sent a better message about regrets than To the Moon. The first game was focusing on delivering an emotional story about a dying man's wish, while Finding Paradise sent a stronger message about coming to terms with the things you already have. The game emphasized on the imperfections of a person's life. You will always make mistakes, and letting those mistakes distract you from things that actually matters, then you can never be contented with your life. Coming to terms with regrets and accept it is the true key to happiness. Fighting Paradise was a fantastic game that doesn't rely heavily on gameplay to keep the player's attention, but mesmerizes them with lovable characters, inspiring music, and incredible writings. It is able to take us through laughter and tears to finally send a message about appreciating the life that we are living. It is truly a masterpiece of a game that inherit everything To the Moon have done well and took it to another level. This is an amazing game that I highly recommend trying if you're a fan of To the Moon or you are just looking for a heartfelt story to get you through this treacherous day. Thank you so much for reaching the end of my video. This video was a bit of a turn for me because I simplified the editing a bit to focus more on game analysis. The script I wrote was reconstructed like 5 times in the last few weeks. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. There was still one more game left for me to tackle, and that is Imposter Factory, as promised in my previous video, so be sure to hit subscribe to know when that is coming out. Or don't, I won't judge. Well, that's all the time I have for this episode. I will see you in the next one. Bye!